Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the BeDifferential Podcast. I'm your host, Ava Gregory, and this week we are joined by the co-founder and CEO of Racing Prodigy, David Cook. Welcome to this week's episode.
Thank you, Ava.
I'm very excited to have you here. We've met, just kind of through work dynamics, and I'm looking forward to really educating the listeners on what Racing Prodigy is and a little bit of your story as well. Do you want to give the listener just high level, maybe a little bit who you are before we really get into it?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm a failed race car driver who ended up on the business side. Very fortunate to have worked for Mazda Motorsports for many years. And when Racing Prodigy came about, left Mazda back in 2022 to co-found Racing Prodigy, and now really working with gaming and traditional motorsports.
I think it's huge, especially in this generation and era of people that are coming into it. We've seen, some origin of the screen to seat experiences over the years, but I think what you guys are doing is really special. So before we dive deep into Racing Prodigy, tell us a little bit, as the failed racer that you mentioned, which is no failure, there were definitely success stories. What ended up being the turning point where you said, okay, let me get involved in this on the business side. I think that I have an impact I can make here.
Well, after racing didn't work out for me, I went back to school, which was always the plan, at least as a kid. I didn't grow up racing. So that started, 16, 17 years old, but I didn't do any karting. So it was a brief stint in open wheel racing with always the plan to go to college. So when racing didn't work out, I did. I went to the University of Virginia in the business school, fell in love with business, and ended up getting roped back in to motorsport through a friend that I had. I was working for Mazda at the time, and then really have been maybe even more passionate about helping those really with the skill, the talent, the work ethic to make it as a real race car driver. So loved my opportunity at Mazda, and then really continuing it at Racing Prodigy.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And you've already emphasized two important things. One, I often get questions about schooling and if people are interested in pursuing a career in motorsports and automotive, what route should they take? And while I definitely think there's no one right route because they all change, I am curious, what degree did you pursue? Was it just like an MBA or something of that sort?
I got my undergrad business degree, double concentrated in marketing and in management. And then I ended up getting my master's in business as well after some work between my undergrad and my graduate.
Very understandable. So let's talk a little bit about how your experiences in the motorsports world and industry really started to evolve and change your perspective on the motorsport landscape.
I always knew that motorsport was expensive. And that was obvious to me when we first started. And really, regardless of talent, and I drove against some amazingly talented individuals, many of whom really their careers came to an end before some others that may not have been as talented. So it was no surprise to me when I came to Mazda that the access problem is still there, and then continuing
Mm,
all the way up to say the top level can get into the millions of dollars. And perhaps more than 10 million, depending on where one wants to go, and how to get there. And that sponsorship really wasn't largely available, particularly at the entry level, amateur or professional, and perhaps not even at the mid level, and still for many at the top level. It's not the business. There's
yeah.
just not enough value in motorsport and a lot of the series to justify the expense. Value exceeds the cost. So it was great to see Mazda work so hard to try to alleviate some of those costs, but there was still a challenge for the majority of people, one, to enter and still to climb that ladder.
Absolutely. So before we get into how Racing Prodigy is helping that, I am curious. You mentioned your brief stint in open wheel. How was it that you got involved in racing, especially to your point, since you didn't do karting from a young age?
So I was very fortunate. So my family did very well and was able to afford a racing school for me. When I was 16, my father raced SCCA at the amateur level after he had succeeded in business, which is not an uncommon story. And then also not uncommon, right? That the father, the parent gets the kid, you know, so my dream was then to follow his footsteps, and he gave me that opportunity. My grandfather helped as well. We got some sponsorship, though not enough, but it was more than most people were getting. And I was able to drive for about 3 years, compete for about 3 years, and again, compete against some great drivers, Ryan Hunter-Reay, AJ Allmendinger, Danica Patrick, and more. It was exciting, but to really get to Indy Lights, which was or Toyota Atlantic, and actually at the time I was driving, it was Toyota Atlantic. It was 600,000 plus to run, and that's where we couldn't do it. So
Yeah.
back to school it was.
I gotcha. It completely makes sense. You're so right. It's definitely still a challenge. So now let's get into it. Tell us all about Racing Prodigy.
Well, Racing Prodigy is built to fix not only the access problem of motorsport, how cost prohibitive it is for most people even to get their butt in a seat at a racing school, but then that continued participation. And that's where we think actually the biggest challenge lies, and no one has solved it. There's been other e to real or virtual or gaming to real initiatives. In fact, when I was at Mazda back starting in 2014, we gave a couple iRacers the opportunity to compete for a scholarship and end up in the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series. 2015, Glenn McGee went from sim to reality or E to real. But then the question always was, how does that driver stay in a car? How do we continue the racing activity? Again, at that level, cost exceeds value. Coca-Cola and other sponsors aren't jumping in, unfortunately, for the Mazda MX-5 Cup Series or a lot of other series. So it makes it very difficult. So really, once the scholarship ends, whether it was Nissan, McLaren, or Mazda, any of the three OEMs that did these E2Real programs, it was really a sink or swim situation. And it was all on the driver to be able to raise 6 or 7 figures to keep racing. And almost all of them failed out. So we said we need to do it differently. How do we create value? And then ultimately, Racing Prodigy came about, which is not just a ladder program, an E to Real sports league and the world's first, but a media company. And that media component is really the key to creating the value to sustain the activity of the racers who truly are deserving.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you're so right. This you guys are positioned to do some really groundbreaking things, I think, and I'm really excited to have met you so early on in this journey. You mentioned and alluded as well that the concept of transitioning from E to real, it's been around for a little bit, right? But I mean, there's still a lot of things going on. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that Racing Prodigy has gone through in proving success of this model and that E to real kind of experience?
Taking gamers and put them in race cars, particularly the world's best gamers, is really the easy part. It's been done before, and us working on it full time, we're able to do it with multiple game publishers and really attract the very best, even better than I think what's been done in the past. The real challenge, though, that we've encountered is building enough fandom
Yeah.
to get people to care about these. Well, one, the stories of these individuals, many from humble beginnings, who really don't have another opportunity to pursue their dreams, and then also the organization that's really trying to transform a sport that's largely been closed to the
Mm.
majority of people across the globe. So that's what we're working very hard to overcome. So we can continue to give more opportunities and sustainable opportunities to those who are deserving.
Yeah, it's such a good point too. I feel like I've heard a lot of back and forth and varying opinions in how people feel about series like Drive to Survive and content creators that focus on motorsports series individually. But I think that it is doing something important of highlighting the access to your point that wasn't there, in a lot of these paddocks you can't enter unless you're a higher level credentialed carrier. So, having this opportunity to create that inside access, I think is really meaningful. So, tell me, I think there's going to be a lot of question too. What kind of racing series is Racing Prodigy feeding into?
We may not be feeding into another series. That very well could happen,
Sure.
where others will recognize the talent of many of our drivers and likely conquest. And then undoubtedly some of our drivers, they've had ambitions and have aspired to either race in NASCAR or IMSA or other series. And if they get their opportunity, I think that they'll jump at it. How could you blame them? But ultimately, and it will take us more time, we want to build our own ecosystem, our own full e-to-real league where you could start in gaming, you can win your all expense paid Prodigy pass to come to Atlanta, our tryouts we call Prodigy Week, to get trained and coached by former F1 IndyCar NASCAR drivers, and then to get drafted. And we had 24 drafted by 6 teams in Williams Formula One fan zone during the Silverstone weekend in London this past July. Talk about dreams turning to reality in those moments. Very
Yeah.
motivating for our team to see that, certainly the drivers too. And now they're racing in our first level of real racing, the P3, the Prodigy 3 championship. But we want a P2 championship, and we're building that now to debut by the end of this year, and then ultimately a P1. So liken it to perhaps F1, F2, and F3.
Yeah.
We want our P1, P2, P3, but we've named it after the people we will discover are discovering prodigies rather than a lot of the series naming it after maybe the style of car. But ultimately, if we can build enough value in the program to where if you're good enough, you can make a career and a very nice living and career within our program and be known globally, then my hope is that they'll want to stay in our program for as long as they can drive.
I think this is so huge. I mean, to have the idea of this completely new ecosystem is, first of all, massive and groundbreaking in itself. And I was going to ask a question about legitimacy. And, I think that there's a lot of nuance and a lot of opinion about drivers going from sim racing to real world scenarios, and how people might question its legitimacy. But what you're doing to create this, I think, is going to speak and prove itself. And that, do you see, is that something that you guys are maybe kind of confronting at this stage in building Racing Prodigy and making yourself a legitimate ecosystem, to use your word? I mean, is that something you're experiencing, or are you just like, no, we're grinding it out and we're going to show it?
No, we're grinding it out, and we're going to show it. And candidly, though, it's these racers. Anybody who's seen these gamers get into a car, they are brilliant. Their very
Yeah.
first session on track, and many of them, about half within their first 3 sessions, are at professional level race times.
Wow.
And it's easy for us to quantify that. Thankfully for auto racing, it's all quantifiable, and we have a number of professional drivers who are helping to support this program and to train and coach these drivers. So when we put 24-hour Daytona winner Kenton Cook in the car to set a baseline, and the very next session out, we have our prodigies in there, and the majority of them go faster than Kenton did.
Wow.
He'll argue maybe changing conditions slightly.
Yeah.
I would say that's a lot. That's 10 minutes of changing conditions without rain. But yeah, having Catherine Legg and Tatiana Calderon, Boris Said, Max Pappas, now Pietro Fittipaldi, and others all really see how talented these drivers are. There's really no question for those who are in. The bigger question is are we going to have any obstacle of convincing the broader audience, say through the docu-series that's coming or other media? Will they have more reservations? So we'll have to overcome those who maybe aren't in it like we
Sure.
are, but ultimately that'll get proven out.
No, that's so many great points. And I'm getting so excited just thinking and hearing about these, next steps. You mentioned a minute ago as well, making sure that this ecosystem is one that's sustainable, that people want to compete in and stay in. And I think through both of our jobs and careers, we experience a lot of the value in a partnership. And you guys have partnered with some major teams and brands. How do you think that this industry buy-in is really going to help to reshape the accessibility of motorsports and ultimately the success of Racing Prodigy?
Well, my co-founder Matt Fosnot had told me, he goes, don't be surprised or act surprised that Williams and others have come in. But the truth of it is, we didn't anticipate some of these brands and teams, organizations to come in our first season.
Yeah,
Often,
seriously.
it's usually it's a wait and see, right? People are risk averse. People who work for corporations are often, I mean, that's the nature of it. So to have Williams, to have G2 Esports and Guild Esports and Thibaut Courtois, the goalkeeper for Real Madrid, all sign up. Sucker Punch, BS Plus Competition, which is BMW's official sim racing team, and it's really encouraging. And then I wasn't sure those within the sport how they would receive this. Would they feel like we're threatening motorsport in some way by stating that it needs to be more accessible, that there's got to be a better way to give opportunity to those deserving, and we think we know it. How does someone take that?
Mm,
But those who have joined, I mean, we got 100 people involved in putting on a race event, and 95 of them come from traditional motorsport.
yeah,
So they're embracing it more than I anticipated. The teams, the coaches are are better and than I anticipated as well. Forgive me, Matt. So it's very encouraging, the support that we're getting, and these racers, they deserve it. So it's really now just how do we make it sustainable for them.
yeah. And so many good points that you just said as well, because the fear of, is it going to be seen as a threat or is it going to be seen as anything? But the reality is, if we want to continue seeing this industry grow, we have to make it more accessible and we have to open those opportunities. And I think it's no secret that it's been seen as an exclusive sport. So while you're mentioning, increasing accessibility, what are some of the specific steps that you guys are taking to really create that diverse and inclusive space?
Well, to create a diverse space, look at other traditional stick and ball sports. They're largely more diverse, the athlete base for sure. And
Sure.
it's pretty straightforward. You lower the barriers to that of traditional stick and ball sports, and you increase the incentive, and the world's best will compete and will emerge.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a diverse group. And that's what we have.
Yeah.
Whereas in traditional motorsport, it's not quite as diverse. There's a lot of strategies and initiatives that are put forward by a lot of different organizations to try to correct it. But I think a byproduct of the system that we've created is why our driver lineup is as or more diverse than any in motorsport. It's more
Yeah.
diverse than any that we're aware of in motorsport.
And this is, I just keep saying this is so huge because this is something that I think so many people should be addressing more of, and you guys are doing it. So tell the listener, for someone that has no idea, had never heard of you guys, what is the process from someone that's interested in getting involved in Racing Prodigy to competing to going to Prodigy Week? Talk us through maybe what you might experience.
For those who are interested in participating, it's also straightforward. Go to racingprodigy.com and you'll see there's multiple tournaments that one can enter. There's one going on now on a mobile game you can download on your iOS device called Street Kart Racing, the racing app. We also run tournaments with iRacing and others. If you go to a Formula One fan zone, you might see Williams, who very well could have a qualifier, or some of the conferences. But really, you can do it just by downloading an app on your phone and participating. And in the case of the app, it's free. If you want
Yeah.
to go through the pathway of iRacing, there's a small membership fee, and then you could win your golden ticket by outright winning a tournament or by placing in the top 25%, and then submitting a 1 minute video of why you're deserving, answers to a short questionnaire. And then we narrow down the submissions to 10 or 15 per tournament, hand them over to Max Pappas or a different elite top level real world racer, and to a sim racing influencer who's paired with the real world, still blending that E and real together and further reinforcing it. And then they pick two or more winners as well. Then you get an all expense paid trip to Atlanta. We'll put you in a fitness assessment with our human performance partner, Pit Fit Training, Jim Leo and Company. You'll get media training. You'll get data acquisition or data training, I should say. We'll put you on the skid pad, autocross, and then in the real race car in the Radical SR1s, all on Atlanta Motorsports Park. And then your coach assessed, and then you're eligible for the draft, which the majority of those who won that golden ticket came to Prodigy Week end up getting drafted by our teams. We give you the racing gear, we cover crash damage, we cover more travel, we give you a coach, and you come out and compete in the real world series in the Prodigy 3 championship. At that point, it's really up to you on how you perform and whether the team keeps you. But the majority of the drivers end up moving up to the P2 championship, but some get eliminated based on
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, this sounds so empowering that I'm like, I can do this. This is no light feat. Like obviously these are athletes and they turn into athletes, but the amount of resources provided and training, I think that's an important piece too, that a lot of racers or a lot of people interested in getting involved might say, I'm a good competitor or I am good at what I do. There are these media training, the how do you read data analysis, the telemetry. I think that all of that is so important that might be overlooked at times. So I'm going to ask, of course, there's some data that is just undeniable, but how do you measure success? I mean, you're looking at talent development, you're looking at changing of the motorsports culture overall. How are you determining success for both maybe an individual and then also for Racing Prodigy?
Well, success for a racer in our program is, did you end up pursuing your dream,
Yeah.
and did you live it? That's about as simple as that gets. A little more complicated perhaps for us, but arguably maybe it's the same. It's, did we continue to build a property that created more value than the cost of actually running the competitions and paying for the racers like other true pro sports do, and that will reveal itself in hopefully a number of years with help of a docuseries, race broadcasts, social media, podcasts, really or organically supporting and talking about and celebrating really opening of motorsports to any and all, regardless of socioeconomic background. But for us, it's going to be, did the fans come?
Yeah.
And we've got some time to get there, but that'll be our measure, our ultimate measure of success.
It's such a good point too, because there are so many intangible pieces of how you determine success, and it's going to be so cool to look back and see the journey of what you guys are accomplishing and building here. So we've alluded to some other series, and we've talked about some ideas that you guys have had when it comes to lowering barriers to entry. Do you think that some of the approaches that you're taking are things that other series within the motorsport space could also be applying to encourage more, open the door for more?
Absolutely. It's not difficult to reach out to any of these game publishers and to put forward a competition. We
Mm,
did it at Mazda. Nissan, McLaren did it. Skip Barber does it. The difference, though, is really how does the entity leverage it for enough value to want to continue that effort and that scholarship that they're providing.
right.
And with Mazda, we did it for 4 years, and we cut it. Nissan cut it. McLaren cut it. Granted, COVID may have had a hand in that. So it's really a question of what are we trying to achieve, and can we do it in that manner? Some of the audience really, and what I mean by that is the esports audience, the participants. You have to be careful of not being seen as doing it for a marketing tactic,
Yeah.
as a way to just try to sell them your product. They'll see through it. It's not going to be a sustainable way. You're not going to really create any meaningful engagement or connection, and most likely you'll shutter the program. So for us, it's more about what are we really trying to accomplish? Is it to promote a product? Well, we didn't have a product. It was, product is this league to try to grow it, which requires the racers. So that authentic reason to do this, where we're actually giving value to the racers, not to just sell them something, I think is very important. So I'm hopeful that brands will get behind this. The racers certainly are. Inside Traditional Motorsport is getting behind it. It's just really one step at a time. So absolutely anyone can go, just about anyone can go host a tournament and give a scholarship, but there needs to be an end game. There needs to be a scenario where you can scale it, you can grow it, and value can exceed costs. Otherwise, you'll shutter it. And that's really a big difference on our model than what has come before us.
I just like want to stand up and applaud because you're so right that the idea of people being so focused on the sales. Obviously, there's so many capitalist like opportunities in motorsports, but to have the authentic care and desire to grow people's passions and nurture what people are excited about in a safe environment that can be productive and sustainable is just massive. And you're so right. You know, in this podcast, we've talked and in a number of other episodes about the feeling of companies just ticking a box and just checking that component of yes, you know, we're doing it to fit whatever the buzzword is right now, but this is a very clear, authentic passion and care for the growth of this. And I think this is just huge. You had mentioned earlier, alluding to some of the future plans for Racing Prodigy, but is there anything specifically that you're really excited about that might be coming up or just, you know, in the next little bit here?
Well, we've got three more race events coming up. One at Homestead, Miami. We go to Atlanta Motorsports Park, and we finish in NOLA. So very excited to see these racers continue to grow and compete. We're in the middle of Esports season 2, so we start to have these winning moments, these golden ticket or Prodigy Pass winning moments, which is really motivating and inspiring to our team to give them an opportunity. We are looking forward to the draft and to adding a couple more teams to the league, expanding to the P2 championship by the end of the year. We're going through an RFP process with multiple manufacturers, OEMs, car manufacturers, to supply the race car. It'll be a bigger, faster, sexier race car that these drivers will certainly be ready for. We're going to be on MAV TV starting March 2nd. So Sunday nights for 10 straight weeks, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, with some re-airs. So very excited for that. And then I think in circa 10 months, our docuseries should come out. I'm very excited to kind of show behind the scenes of really building the business and really of these drivers and teams who are, you know, really pursuing something special. You know, on that note, I'll take a tangent for a moment, if I may. But the drivers, they're just so special. We've got a 15-year-old. He won his golden ticket when he was 14, and he drives his parents' tractor on the small farm in Austria, and all he wants to do is race a car, but he doesn't have the pocketbook. And man, is he Julian Klaufenbach? Is he brilliant behind the wheel? And there are many with very very similar stories as this. Three of our drivers are autistic and amazing behind the wheel. And there's something really there's some superpower there, particularly when the changing conditions, when the rain occurs. The ability to really wheel the car is even more impressive. So we've got some individuals who are truly deserving, and it's really motivating and inspiring to give the opportunity to them. And candidly, they're very motivated to inspire others, which is really, really wonderful to see.
Wow. Yeah. I was literally going to ask, you know, is there a story that you could just kind of say, like, this is so fulfilling? And you just captured it. I mean, that's amazing to show this opportunity and create the opportunity, especially at an international level. I mean, I'm so excited for you guys. So let me ask David now, you know, you kind of gave the process if someone's interested in getting involved, but what is a piece of advice you might have for someone that whether it's as a racer or just getting more involved in the motorsport industry, how would you advise them to get more involved and to look for a path in?
If you're serious about breaking into motorsport, either behind the wheel or in another discipline, maybe as a crew member or marketing or PR or something else, really you have to want it because it's probably not going to be easy and just clearly available, which then is going to require you to likely network, do research, figure out who to talk to, how to enter, how to throw your name in the hat, and then not just throw your name in the hat, really be polished in how you're trying to present what you want. But I feel like motorsport it's a very welcoming environment more than any other traditional sport that I've been involved in. Everyone really supports one another, but it's difficult to break in. It almost feels like you need to know somebody. So for us, if you're trying to get on the business side, leverage LinkedIn. If you want to race, if you don't have tons and tons of money, Racing Prodigy. And ultimately, we do want to provide additional opportunities outside of the seat
Right.
and through STEM and more here in the next year or two. For us, it's kind of one step at a time, but it's really determination, networking, and making sure you do a fine job, and then you can break in. And once you're in, seems like you're in for life.
I would second that. I feel like I don't know many people at all that have successfully exited motorsports once they've entered. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, David, as we're closing out here, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience, whether about Racing Prodigy or just the motorsport landscape in general?
The last thing I perhaps to share, or maybe a request, would be, root on these drivers, get to know their stories. I think people will better understand really what we're trying to solve for. And so that would be it. The Brandon Hawkins, the Julian Kloffenbachs, and Alexander Vielma, these racers and many others really deserve their opportunity, and the only way we can give it to them is if we do it together. So that's fandom, that's participation, that's encouraging them, that's spreading the word. It's whatever you can do, but anything you can do to help these racers and give more people opportunity who are deserving would be the ask.
That's great. And along those lines, David, where can the listener follow along with Racing Prodigy's journey and continued success?
We share a lot of information on our social media platforms. Instagram, certainly our YouTube channel, so any of the Racing Prodigy social channels. And then, of course, racingprodigy.com has a lot of information. And then if you want to come to a race event, come to Homestead AMP NOLA, come to Prodigy Week, we're open. So reach out to us. There's information on racingprodigy.com. Would love to have them so they can see and experience and feel kind of what we feel and what we see, and we think that it'll be a wonderful experience.
Absolutely. David, is there a way to watch these events now without being in person?
We do go live on
Okay.
Instagram and on YouTube during the race events, but MAV TV is going to broadcast hour-long shows for each of the 10-round championship. We have a preview show coming March 2nd. It's going to be wonderful shows because it's not just great racing action, but we integrate a lot of storytelling, a lot of vignettes, driver vignettes, and more to really showcase what we're doing and why and who we're doing it for. It's a bit of an American Idol meets motorsport kind of approach.
What a cool visual. I love that. Well, and we will definitely have all the information in the description so you guys can find them with ease. David, thank you so much for sharing just a snippet of what you guys are doing and the part of the process that has taken to get you here. I'm so, so excited to continue watching Racing Prodigy grow and keeping up with the drivers and building that base a little bit myself as well. So thank you for tuning in this week. Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll see
Ava,
you
is
next
it
week.
Ava or Eva?
It's
Yeah.
Ava.
I want to make sure I pronounce your name. Ava, I got
It's
it
okay.
right.
It's
Okay, I
Ava.
thought
Yeah,
so,
you
but
got it. It's okay.
is it
It's
okay?
okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
good. We're
good.
good.